have sat and sold tickets for food and sodas. As kids, we collected the empty soda bottles and cleared tables. It was fun when we got older and got to work in the booths to serve sodas, ice cream, or food by ourselves or alongside of the adults that we had grown to know and love. There was always a bake sale, and some of the best desserts could be found there. My Aunt Dorothy always brought her famous pineapple upside-down cake, while Aunt Arlene made her special chocolate cake. Of course, you could buy Pennsylvania Dutch treats, such as shoe fly pie, funny cake, and a pea cake, too. Okay. There were also some years when they had games for the kids. Once there was a peanut toss where we got little paper bags to collect as many peanuts as we could while the adults tossed them in the air. But I also fondly remember the adult games where they had to put on a pillowcase without holding the pillow under their chin, pass an orange down the line with their hands behind their back, or eat a marshmallow as it hung from a string. It was so much fun to see adults who were revered having fun, laughing, and being vulnerable as they tried their best to play along. We all have wonderful memories of that special day in September when all the church members, regardless of age, came together to raise money and to continue a tradition of the Sunday School Oyster Picnic that was already over 100 years old. I'm so glad that it continues today. We also had the year that my brother Rusty jumped off the bandstand, which was ground level in the front and sloped downhill on the sides and back, and got hurt. We came running to my mom, who was inside the pavilion having coffee and pie with her friends. As a nurse, she stayed calm and said, tell him to go sit in the car, and when I'm done, I'll take you to the hospital. Her friend's eyes grew wide with shock at her response, but she just as calmly said, "Hey, if it's broke, it's broke." Thinking back now, though, we know that giving Rusty a few minutes to calm himself down and not panicking herself provided Rusty a chance to catch his breath, relax before he got an x-ray and subsequent cast for what was indeed a broken arm. You know, we also have a cousin, Susan, who met her husband at the picnic. She was working in the ice cream stand when Frank showed up. They talked throughout the day and evening, and one thing led to another, and now they have been married over 30 years and have a daughter and 2 grandsons, and they still love to go out for ice cream.
Hi, I'm Greg Landis. That's me with the suspenders on the church steps at age 5 or 6. It would have been in the mid-1950s. The Union Sunday School class, meaning the Reformed and Lutheran kids, would march over from the church, carrying a church school banner, and then start the afternoon entertainment off with a few of the songs we had learned in our classes. As soon as that was over, off we'd go to eat, play, and run around the grounds all afternoon and into the evening. My parents, Howard and Gladys Landis, always worked in the kitchen, Mom making the oyster stew and Dad working the fryers. Howard was also often seen out and about within the crowds, laughing and telling stories with his friends and neighbors, always still wearing his greasy apron and a huge smile. As the oldest of their 3 kids, I was supposed to keep an eye on my younger sister, Chris, or my brother, Jim, but I don't ever remember doing that. A couple things I do remember from those days. One picnic, I climbed up to the top of the large metal pipe swing set that we had. I was all proud of myself until my friend John Lazinski threw a rock and hit me square in the mouth. Well, I ran into the kitchen bleeding, looking for help and sympathy from my mom. She took a look at my chipped front tooth and bloody mouth and just gave me a couple of ice cubes and a dish towel. She was way too busy making stew. She said something like, "Put some ice on it and we'll take you to the dentist later." On another year, my friend Darrell Smith and I were running around the woods, and somewhere out near the outhouses, we stepped on a ground bee's nest. Until we had realized it, we both had bees up our pants legs, stinging us like crazy. We ran past the stage and over into the parking lot, swatting, shaking, trying everything we could to get those bees out. But we were two herding pups. And that pretty much cooled our jets for the rest of that day. So for about 7 years, except for a few college years, I've been a part of the old Oyster picnic. After my carefree childhood days, I've had many roles, from dishwashing to shucking oysters and a little of everything in between. Of course, there are many hours spent setting up and preparing for such an event like this, and then taking down and cleaning up at the day's end. While that's a lot of hard work, I find it really satisfying to be able to host such a long-standing community gathering. God has blessed us with this tradition, and I'll continue to help as long as I'm able.
Hi, my name is Denise Mensinger from Whitehall, PA. My grandparents, Ella Shirk Hiller from Schwenksville Road in Schwenksville, and William Charles Hiller from Schwenksville, met each other at the old Goshenhoppen picnic in 1915. At that time, they were participants in a dance which they called Ring. The boys were in one circle and the girls were in another circle. When the music stopped, whomever you were facing was the person you danced with. That is how they met. They were married on December 14, 1918, in the parsonage of Jerusalem Lutheran Church in Schwenksville by Reverend N.F. Schmidt. Pastor Schmidt's wife was the only witness. They went to the parsonage by horse and buggy. I believe my grandmother and her sisters and friends walked to the picnic, and my grandfather went by horse and buggy. They were married for 62 years. What a dance. Story. One of my grandmother's brothers, Jacob Shirk, used to sit at the picnic and watch the people. He also enjoyed talking with the people. One of my grandmother's sisters, Mary Shirk Buman of Schwenksville, always used to go early to the picnic to get a front row seat. Her husband, Fred Buman, always parked his car where they would get a good spot to watch what was going on the stage. They loved watching the Sunday school children perform their songs. Mary always had somebody buy a pie from the picnic, and she would cut it in pieces and then served it with a dip of ice cream from the picnic. What a treat.
Hi, my name is Pastor Kevin Park of Old Goshenhoppen Reformed Church, and I get to talk a little bit about the Oyster picnic, what it means, but specifically the year that the tornado hit the property here at Old Goshenhoppen, where really the area behind me, which used to kind of be a lush tree canopy, became a little more sunlighted. So when it comes to the Oyster picnic here at Old Goshenhoppen, an event 10 years older than the oldest Groundhog's Day, this is one of those events when you candidate as a pastor. It's a unique experience. You submit all your theology to a congregation. You kind of talk personally about your life, who you are, and also the person of Jesus Christ. But here at Old Goshenhoppen, you get an additional question candidating for the position here, and that is, what is your opinion on oysters? So I've always been a fan. Actually, one of the things I've loved about serving here is that I kind of count my tenure by oyster picnics. This upcoming picnic will be the 7th oyster picnic I've been part of. Really, the oyster picnic was the first event I ever participated in with the larger community of Old Goshenhoppen. And so it is an event with wonderful memories, but uniquely, the year that stands out for me is the storm year, the tornado year. What happened that day is I was actually at the Phillies game. My family was there, this family in the congregation, the Kratz family. We were at a Phillies game. And I guess when the storm hit the property, we were on a rain delay at the game. There was thunderstorms in the downtown Philly area, so they totally stopped the game for about 40 minutes. And all of a sudden, my cell phone starts blowing up. Are you okay? Are you all right? We're really worried about you in the storm. And I'm going, how does this whole church know that I'm at the Phillies game? This is not a big deal. Just a little bit of thunderstorm. Yeah, okay. I guess all of these people, this is my first couple months here, all these people are huge baseball fans. I could work into some more baseball illustrations or something. Little did I know what was going on here at property. When we came back that evening, it was so disorienting. We could only really get within a third of a mile to the church itself. There were so many downed trees on the property itself, roughly somewhere in the vicinity of 50 to 100 downed trees. It was overwhelming, the amount of devastation that we saw. Not a single building on the property wasn't hit in some sort of way. Whether it was the Gemein house with windows, the church had a tree fall on it, we had damage in the parsonage, and the stories from that day. We had an individual in the parking lot. He basically said that the funnel clouds were hopping around the property. We could kind of see that after the fact. They kind of jumped over the parsonage, jumped over the church, hit the steeple. We were condemned for the first week pending inspection, state inspection, so we had worship outside that first Sunday after the storm without power for like 4+ days here at the church. So needless to say, in a situation like that, people rally together and they band together. And this was no different with the storm. Individuals, I think of Larry Weeder, I think of Kathy and Gray, and so many others chipped in ways big and small in order to get this area ready for an oyster picnic. There were many who kind of said, this is going to be the year we can't keep the tradition going. And I woke up to many mornings where, Larry Weeder might be here at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on a tractor, or someone else just working on trees, working on getting this property to a place where we could have an oyster picnic. Now, during this time in the recovery of the storm, we were twice featured on Fox 29 News in Philadelphia. We had interviews with them. They came out to the property and kind of saw some of the devastation. They would later come out and see us also in the COVID year, but that's different. But we had such a rally for support with the broader community. So many people wanted to come out that year to help us put on a wonderful picnic. And we were so thankful because every year when it comes to the picnic, we've really tried to donate every dollar to charities. We don't want to keep it in here at the church. We want to bless our broader community. And so we had a banner year. I still think it's the best year of the 6 I've been a part of. Maybe this year for 7 we'll do better, but it was just so exciting that after that storm happened, within a short amount of time, we were able to kind of rally together. Those kinds of situations bring up the best of people, and it was just a really wonderful moment to see the quality and character of so many individuals here at Old Goshenhoppen. And then just the fact that through this event, we can really reach the community, we share this growth, and remember with one another what it's like to live in community. My previous stop in ministry before Waxhaw was Las Vegas, Nevada. There is something beautifully unique about the communal reality here. The little events that go on throughout this region of the country that just band people together. And this little oyster picnic for this little congregation off the beaten path, not where modern churches would want to put a church, it's something special. And so that year really struck me uniquely. Here I was, a newer pastor here. I'm the outsider from the West joining this community, but I got to see salt of the earth kind of people who really persevered, and that quality continues to be seen throughout this community in events that would be in the future, like COVID, and events even in our own day. That real desire to continue through adversity is something that just blessed to see.
These crosses were made from some of the white oak that were felled by the tornado. Some much larger pieces were taken to Philadelphia to repair the hull of the good ship Gazetta.
Hi, my name is Rose Kramer. My family and I came to Old Goshenhoppen in 1996. We were drawn to the beauty of the church and the graveyard. I really didn't know much about the Oyster picnic when we came, but that surely changed fast. My family got quickly invested in all the aspects of the event right from the start. I helped in the kitchen wherever I was needed. My husband was on dishwashing duty, and my 3 kids helped out with the kids' activities and scooping ice cream. I really didn't know much about the history of the church, and especially the little log cabin in the back of it. One Oyster picnic, I took a walk over to the Gamine house because the door was open, and a man dressed in buckskin with a raccoon hat was sitting there telling the history of the church and the Gamine house. I immediately fell in love with the old building. The man was Ken Oschleicher, fondly known by his relatives as Uncle Ken. He spent countless hours working on the Gamine house years before to preserve it for future generations. I told him I was a member of the Goshenhoppen historians, and I knew how to cook in a colonial fireplace. From that Oyster picnic on, that's exactly what I did. For a few more years, Ken sat by the door greeting visitors and telling them about the history of the church and Gamine house, while I made Pennsylvania German sausage stew, roast chicken hung over a fire, and apple pie. It was a lot different than being in the center of the Oyster picnic at the Grove, but I still got my allotment of fried oysters brought over on a golf court, driven by Dave Mitchner. He went back and forth all day bringing visitors from the Grove over to the Gamine house. It was wonderful listening to the Red Hill Band play on stage over at the Grove while cooking in the colonial fireplace. Although Uncle Ken passed away in 2007, his legacy surely lives on in the Gamine house. I continued cooking in the fireplace during the Oyster picnic until 2019, which is when we started restoration on it. I'm hoping to cook once again when it is reopened. Rest assured, I will be back over in the kitchen helping out in order to get my beloved fried oysters. When you're finished in the Gamine house, take a stroll down to the Spring house.
Paul writes to the Ephesians in 6:7, "Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not men, because you know that the Lord will reward everyone for what good he does, whether he is slave or free."
Hi, my name is Bruce Clydesdale, and I am the associate pastor here at Old Gosh. The story I'm telling is not about the picnic, but it is about oysters. In fact, it's called The Oyster Man. It appeared in a little devotional pamphlet called Our Daily Bread on April 9th of 2008 and was written by Cindy Hess Casper. I hope you enjoy her story and the message. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, shocked many of his well-educated friends by allowing lay preachers a very limited education to sometimes conduct church services. One of these lay preachers used Luke 19, verse 21 as his text. Lord, I fear thee, because thou art an austere man. The word austere was not familiar to him, so he sounded out the letters and assumed the text said, thou art an oyster man. In his sermon, he told how a diver must grope in the dark, freezing water to retrieve oysters. Often, he cuts his hands on the sharp edges of the shells. Then he rises to the surface, clutching the oyster in his torn and bleeding hands. The preacher added, Christ descended from the glory of heaven into sinful human society in order to retrieve humans and bring them back up with him to the glory of heaven. His torn and bleeding hands are a sign of the value he places on the object of his quest. After this sermon, 12 men received Christ. Later that night, someone came to Wesley to complain about the unschooled preacher who was too ignorant to even know the difference between the words austere and oyster. The Oxford University educated Wesley simply said, never mind, the Lord got a dozen oysters tonight. Our best may not always measure up to the standards of others, but God takes our inadequacies and humble effort and uses them for his glory.
It's the morning of the picnic. The tents were set up last night. The morning dew is being wiped off the tables and chairs. Grills and fryers are starting to heat up. The trough for drinks will be filled with ice. The ice cream arranged in the freezer. By the way, the open pavilion you see in this picture will be replaced in 2020 after being crushed by a fallen tree. Take a last-minute look around outside. Yep, everything looks ready to go. The kitchen has been cleaned. Everything is set up. Bowls, check. Plates, check. Trays, check. Let's bring on those hungry people.
In Romans 12, 7 through 8, Paul instructs us, if it is serving, let him serve. If it is teaching, let him teach. If it is encouraging, let him encourage. If it is contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it is leadership, let him govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully.
A lot has changed over the years. The menu, prices, volunteers, structure, the land itself. But there's always great food, fun, fellowship, and entertainment. God is good. It wouldn't be an oyster picnic without, well, oysters. One year, we shucked over 4,000 raw oysters. Of course, the traditional food for the picnic is oyster stew. It's made from an old, time-tested recipe in antique pots on an old gas stove. Milk, butter, salt, pepper, and of course, oyster liqueur. Oysters are delicate. You don't want to cook them too long, just until the edges curl. Once they're ready, you ladle them into the hot milk broth right before serving.
In 2 Corinthians 9:12, Paul writes, "This service that you perform is not only supplying the needs of God's people, but is also overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God."
The kitchen is a loud and busy place. Platters are being put together, stews served up. Hey, look, there's Steve Ford in the orange shirt. He was our interim pastor a couple of times between 2010 and 13, and we really appreciate him stepping in to help. Don't forget your dessert. Over the years, we've had a lot to choose from: cakes, pies, funnel cakes, home-baked goods, ice cream, birch beer floats, and even Judy's Java, either served hot or iced. Back in the day, we only took cash or check, but nowadays we take credit card too. We often have other things for sale besides the food. Years ago, Gladys Landis, there she is in the blue t-shirt, started the White Elephant table. Sometimes we have homemade quilts that are raffled off, and t-shirts, and a variety of different crafts. This year, they'll all be for sale over in the fellowship hall at the church. Stop by and see what you like.
In 1 Peter 4:10, Paul coaches us saying, "Each one of you should use whatever gift he has received to serve others faithfully, administering God's grace in its various forms."
By the 1980s, the old cinder block and concrete bandstand was literally falling apart. I remember one year we had a local favorite band, the Johnston Brothers, and they were playing when it started to rain. By the time they got their equipment packed up, they and all the electronics were soaked. At that point they said, we love this picnic and this grove and we love the crowds, but we will not play here again